Hi, everyone. My name is Manisha from AVP Strategic Partnerships at SCORE, which is a global life and property and casualty reinsurer. I'm based in the US. I'm an actuary by background, and I oversee the end to end development of new life insurance solutions. And I work really closely with insurers, insurtech firms, brokers, tech providers, you name it. But that's not what you want to hear about today. But today's topic is called More Than Just an Actuary. And it's really focused on building your inner leader and brand. Now, actuarial conferences, if you've been to in the past, have a myriad of topics, and personal development ones are few and far between. But it's really ones like these that can help you capitalize and seize new opportunities for where other topics are teaching you skills or what's happening in the industry, and this can help you insert into the spots that you may want to get into next. And so today, I really want to focus with the time we have on three main areas. One is just the dangers of placing yourself in a box and how to get out of the box mentality, what that means. Two is on questions to awaken your inner leader. And three is on building your personal brand. Now, you may have noticed in my introduction that I said I'm an actuary by background, and you may have wondered why I use those words. And no, it wasn't just because I'm in a role that's a bit less traditional and broader. It's really language I've actually used throughout my career, and it's been deliberate because how you choose to define and describe yourself can also become your limiting factor. And especially when you have the weight of the term actuary, it's easy to lose your own individualization. It's easy to forget to comment on the unique purpose or focus of your work or your passion when you're introducing yourself and even how you're thinking about things. So, starting with the box, with the term actuary, we kind of have to start with, why do we get so sucked into that term when we're defining ourselves? Well, we spend so much time and energy progressing on the actuarial path, right? It's long, it's tedious. You're juggling it at the same time that you're doing school or work or both, along with the rest of your social life and extracurriculars. It is a very well defined, concrete path with set milestones, and it's not a small feat. So that's also what makes it as fulfilling as it is. There's a pride and joy that comes from getting to the end. So, of course, you mentioned it in your introductions. You deserve to after the amount of years of life that it's taken. But the danger is that if that's all you tell yourself you are, or that you think you are, then when opportunity comes knocking with something that may look and feel a bit different, you may think it's not your calling or that you're unable. Right? Or when you see someone that might possess characteristics you don't have, but that you desire, and it could be, characteristics that aren't common in the actuarial profession, you may think, well, I'm an actuary, so this is how I am, or this is how I should be. And I see this all the time. It's people stunting their own growth by putting themselves into a box. And I'll give another very simple example just of this concept, but I was a co-op student, which is, the longer term version of an intern, about 6 times in different parts of the world. And I worked alongside many others. So we were, students at a university and did part of our time working somewhere. But we had dramatically different perspective on what it meant to be a co-op. Most felt, okay, we are students, we're more green, we should be doing, small tasks, shouldn't be given heightened responsibility, shouldn't talk to people in the corner offices that are very senior, staying in your lane, so on and so forth. It's very common. And I did the opposite. Instead of using that lens of here are the things I shouldn't do, well, I took each of those as opportunities. So I took the opportunity to talk to very senior people, to ask for more responsibility and ownership, and knowing why I was doing the work I was doing, i.e. the bigger picture, and that really accelerated my own learning and skills tenfold. But it wouldn't have if I stayed in that usual box of co-op or student. And while that's a simple example, people do this all the time at different box classification levels. And often it's subconscious, right? Like happens at the gender level all the time. I'm a woman, so I shouldn't deserve ABC, or I shouldn't do this or that. Um, and and so it's really that we do this all the time, and it's good to develop a very strong awareness to it. And so with the term actuary in particular, which is where this topic comes in, is that the actuarial box has been rather defined either by a governing body you were with or just what you're used to seeing with where you work. But as you approach different roles, as you approach jobs, tasks, it's good to try and break it apart. So remove the box out. Forget you're an actuary. If you see traits, characteristics you like, try to focus on developing them, even if they're absolutely atypical from what you would see with an actuary. Same with work. If something is a bit different and maybe it's more on the finance side or investment side, could be on the business side, use that as an opportunity to learn and grow your knowledge to supplement maybe traditional actuarial knowledge you have, as opposed to thinking, well, I'm an actuary, so this is my focus. So that's a bit of the concept of a box, and also some of the dangers from being stuck within that. Because from several discussions and mentorship convos over the years, that tends to be the limiting factor. And you find there's people who finally decide they want to switch into something dramatically different, but they've stayed in that box for so long that they haven't pushed the bounds to help them either develop the skills or the connections necessary to make that change. So getting out of the box is the first step to being more than an actuary. So rather than letting the term define you, let it be in the background as you let everything else around you as a holistic person be your definition. So the next is on leadership and really tapping into your inner leader. Now, here's where this goes wrong a lot of the time when people think about leadership. They think, well, this doesn't apply to me. I don't have any direct reports, or I'm still a student, or I don't read anything currently. And because of that, people often neglect listening to leadership talks, leadership training, whatever it is. But here's the thing, leadership and building the leader that you want to become starts so young, and it's not just when you have direct reports. It is every interaction, from your interactions at your household, school projects, work, teams, extracurriculars. All of those things build your leadership style, whether you realize it or not. Which also means that every one of those instances is a deliberate opportunity that you can take to improve and enhance your style. So I started actively trying to tap in and build my own inner leader in high school. And so I treated pretty much every extracurricular and project I was involved in as a way to practice guiding, leading, facilitating, persuading, collaborating, because you get those opportunities from school. At the earliest stages, you don't have to just be in a job to cultivate the skills that essentially are needed if you ever want to lead an organization or an area or what have you. You get the diversity of different people, and it's a great practice ground. It's a lower risk practice ground starting as early as physically possible. And even if you didn't take that time and say you're out of school, it doesn't mean you can't practice now. It is never too late. And even if you're working now and you're in a big team, you can use this too. So we'll talk about a few questions you can ask yourself to tap into what is your current style, and what type of leader do you want to become with that style. So one good question to start to ask yourself is, how do you show up with others? And for simplicity, let's take meetings as an example, whether it's a school meeting for a project if you're in school, or whether it's a work meeting. Now, recall that your tendencies become your habits, which become you and what you're known for. So, in meetings, with how you show up, if you've asked yourself that question, then feel free to drop it in the chat, but maybe you're quiet in meetings. If you are quiet in meetings, people expect that. They won't call on you, they won't solicit your feedback because they're used to you not saying anything. And the danger with that is that, that time where you do have a very big idea, they'll probably pass without getting to you to say something because you're not in the habit of speaking up. And when you're not in the habit of speaking up, there's a lot of lost opportunity. And it further drives the habit of not saying anything because you become dismayed and discouraged with that instance. And I'm starting with this as an example because in the actuarial profession, it's common to have that. It's common to see people being quieter. They might be thinking things, but without being in that urge, if there wasn't the practice of speaking up, it doesn't occur. So what can you do? Well, this is one of the hardest things. The easiest way with how you can try to improve how you show up, if you are quiet, is trying to start talking at the beginning of the meeting, volunteering yourself first, which is the hardest and perhaps most intimidating. But then it's out of the way. You've also set a precedent. Instead of, people waiting at the end to see if you all say something, it's like, hey, I'm going to give my opinion first. So it's difficult at the start, but with practice, trying to say or get in a few words in the beginning of the meeting can really help change that dynamic and bring you from being someone more quiet to someone at the forefront until it becomes then, your common nature. So that's if you're on the quieter end. Maybe you're on the opposite end of the spectrum. If you answered the how you show up in meetings as, I'm the loud, talkative, dominant one, then what you have to think about is, are we lacking diversity of thought? Are people used to you speaking, and so others are naturally going to just stay quieter because you're filling in the space and there isn't space for them to emerge? And then what happens is it's just your idea or your words that get out there, and it kind of just gets accepted. But there could be other feedback, other thoughts, other ideas, great ideas from the quieter folk, and you wouldn't know because you're used to just speaking. And so if you're in that bucket on how you show up, then it's good to practice speaking last, or actively soliciting opinion from everyone else there before stating your views. So it's balancing, right? All of this is tapping into your inner leaders. First, having an understanding of what is your current state, and then B, how do you balance and get to a more accepting, stronger state as a leader? And finally, on how you show up, if you are in the middle ground, right? And if you generally listen, you speak, etc. You're neither here nor there in terms of really quiet or really loud. Well, that's a good opportunity to develop some of the other elements of leadership. So taking the opportunity to steer the meeting or to lead it. Facilitating a meeting requires, getting diverse viewpoints, listening, challenging people, summarizing what you hear, echoing it back and adding it on. So you can practice those elements of a meeting, especially if you're in the middle ground and you're already used to talking and listening at the same time. Part of that's also saying the things that people are scared to say, or the more uncomfortable things, and ultimately helping foster a safe space. So when you are starting your journey of being an inner leader, ask yourself, how do you show up, and start there. The next question to ask yourself is, what do you want to be known for? And this ties into brand. But just take a second and think about it right now. Like, what are maybe 3 things you want to be known for? And I can guarantee you everyone's is going to be different. And you're welcome to also drop this in the chat if you want to compare and contrast. But after you think about it for a while, the next thing to ask yourself is, am I doing things that convey those three things to outsiders? And oftentimes you might be surprised that that may not be the case, or that what you would like to be known for is not actually how you are showing up and how others perceive you, which can be a very strong reality check. And that often happens when feedback sessions occur. At some companies, they'll have the concept of a 360 survey where you're getting feedback from people below you, laterally above. And you may go, huh? Like I didn't know I was this way. I thought I was that. And it's shocking, but it's a sad reality that often we think we are a certain way and it can be perceived differently. So actually getting feedback from those you interact with most, especially on the stuff you want to be known for, is a good first step. And then after that, it's really trying to actively practice what you preach. So, for example, if one of the things you want to be known for is being open-minded, then be hyper aware the next time someone is giving you an idea, thinking, were you listening to it, accepting it, kind of adding on to it? Were you dismissing it? Those are things that you may be doing subconsciously because our habits are so strong that we may think we were being open-minded because we've asked for ideas, but we may not have actually made the other feel like their idea was heard or appreciated. So think of your three things. Think about what you're doing, what actions that you may be doing in your day-to-day that actually help foster it. And if you can't find an action that fosters it, try to. Whether it's being friendly, whether it's you being more stern or more assertive, whether it's confidence. You can watch recordings of yourself in meetings and go, did I exude confidence? Or, was my body language shy and timid? Right? If it's confidence, was your presence there? And we can do a whole hour on that, so I'll move quickly. But this is all things that build ultimately what your brand is. And in connection to that, what you communicate out to the world is not just from your interactions with people in meetings. It is also your presence elsewhere. So social media. Do you have LinkedIn? Guessing most of you do, and that's how this conference is also largely advertised. But if you want to be known as a thought leader, maybe that's part of one of your three things. Well, are you actively posting material that indicates so on your LinkedIn? Or are you following other thought leaders and liking and commenting? All of the things that are available for others to see, on the online world are also part of what your external brand becomes. And if you're actively doing things in the thought leadership space, naturally that's going to become something you are known for. If you're not active at all online, it doesn't mean you have to. But again, if that's something, being a thought leader, being more out there, whatever, is at all your interest, make sure that your own individual marketing and what you're posting and what you're commenting on is also in line with what you want to be known for. And that in part will also help shape your brand, especially your internal view of your brand, and then externally how others perceive it. Next, with being a leader and tapping into it, there's the concept of moving away from operational to strategic. And this is really not specific to a certain age or a number of years of experience, because you can see it all the time across the board that if you're used to being very operational, so very task oriented, very into the details, that switch, that strategic switch is challenging. It requires active practice, and you can practice that at the earliest level possible. like with our current co-op students we have, they're all trained with leading with purpose with anything they do, which means if they were given a task, an analysis task, let's say it's in Excel, when they reply in an email with the results of their analysis, they will always state the purpose, the context, why they were doing what they were doing, and then they lead after with everything that followed from the more operational standpoint. But this is something that without active practice is tough to just turn on. And you may find you become in a leadership role and you're still going operational. And you can't persuade the people you need to persuade, or you can't convince someone of doing something because you haven't painted the vision, the purpose, the context behind your ask, because you were so used to looking at things at a microscopic view that going into a telescopic one is harder. So for this one I can't stress enough because it only improves with ample practice. But a good way is with whatever you are communicating, whether it's in an email or in a meeting, verbally, written, etc. State your context first and then answer. Give the background, then answer the question. Now, if you don't know the purpose or context of what you're supposed to comment on, it's good to start there. Ask yourself, understand it. Once you understand something well, you can explain it. And often that means you need to talk to other folks who have that strategic understanding and vision in order for you to understand that big picture to then help set the tone. So those are some tips, just moving from going heavily on the operational side to very, more strategic. And it doesn't mean, especially as you're all actuaries or actuaries in the making, being strategic does not mean you don't have your technical skills or you don't use them. This is this overarching, primer or start before you dive into that. And then people will appreciate you a lot more because then they'll understand everything else around the great work you were doing. So those are some of the main, things when you're trying to tap into your inner leader and also your brand and what you want to be known for. But common feedback, I talk to a lot of different functional areas who deal with actuaries, and their feedback is always, well, I wish they would bother to understand what I was doing. And that's a big piece. That's where curiosity comes into play and getting out of the box. If you're in a box because you're a pricing actuary and you're focused only on pricing and everything to do with it, you may miss everything that happens before and after that's instrumental to a product or to the business. So this one, in terms of learning other functional areas, is actually a very easy one. We're in a virtual world right now. You can schedule time with people in different departments. When I moved into reinsurance, I literally would sit down and I shadowed an underwriter to learn about how full underwriting works. I shadowed claims. Those are areas I didn't have to deal with much, but I wanted to understand what they were doing, and it gave a lot of appreciation, and it helped with strategic vision, understanding the business and the big picture. So wherever you are, whatever team you're in, try to get a good feel for the others that you work with, the work that they're involved in, and then tangentially related departments. Also good to read your, if you're in a public company, you can read their annual statements, see what their strategic plan is, try to develop a higher level of investment around the work you're in, its greater purpose. So those are some other key things. And then one thing that I found was very helpful along the path of developing my own leadership style, which, by the way, is a lifelong journey. It's not one and done, but it starts somewhere and can start as early as high school or even before, but is finding mentors. And it doesn't have to just be your boss, or just people at work. It can be folks from outside work. It can be outside the industry. but keeping a diversified set of mentors that you can go to on some frequency has been really invaluable, because there's everything that you know about the world, and then there's everything else out there. And oftentimes, beautiful opportunities come from dealing with other people, from relationships, from networking, from talking to someone, them keeping you in mind. And then when something arises, they reach back out. That's how a lot of things get created, and doors that you may want to open in niche areas, whether it's data science or whatnot, build connections there. Think about, you know, who you see on LinkedIn. And if you don't use LinkedIn, I would recommend it as a tool to find people. If you're trying to make a career change or a sector switch, or you're trying to, better emulate a role model, search, reach out. Cold calls and cold emails and messages on LinkedIn actually go pretty well, especially on the messaging side. If you're seeking mentorship, people are rather receptive to that, and often will spend the time, especially if they can help you in some way, which, by the way, you are all more than welcome to add me on LinkedIn. And I'm also happy to help mentor or guide in any way that I can. So outside of mentorship, having a support system is useful. If you have certain goals and you have either family or a partner or friends who know that they can keep you accountable to it, especially if you're studying for exams. But they can also help you maybe from an action perspective to help you get toward those goals, especially if you articulate them. And not everyone has the type of support system that they would like when it comes to reaching certain goals. And so this is where podcasts, webcasts, pretty much scrolling YouTube and Spotify, there is so much on the personal development side that you can find online. And so as you build your self-awareness journey, because this entire topic is really, the underlying theme is heightening self-awareness and then taking action around it. And you may not always know what the action is, right? Today's we're just going broad on a few actions and things to ask yourself, but there's so much online in different areas where you may be trying to develop, and it could be on, staying more calm, mental stability. It could be on finding motivation. It could be on finding your individual life purpose. So not what your purpose is at work, but what is your higher purpose? What do you want your life to work toward? And they have so many great exercises there, things you can listen to. And so in the absence of support system and in the absence of finding mentors that can help in those areas, tapping into online is great. And just to end, when you're really tapping into your inner leader and who you are beyond just being an actuary, one of the things that helps this journey a lot more is humility, and really knowing that you only know what you know, and there's a world out there of the unknown and folks that may know a lot more, especially in certain different areas, and that's okay. And rather than thinking of that as a way to, go, well, that's not my lane, I'm focused on XYZ, you can use that as the chance to learn from them, grow, expand your knowledge, and getting into that habit of lifelong learning. And that learning shouldn't stop when school's over. In fact, it stays, yearly if you choose to have that. So I try to learn something new every single day. Luckily, with work, I learn many new things on a daily basis. But outside of that, I also try to supplement and listen to podcasts, see what's happening in the news, research companies that pique my interest. All of those things get you into the habit of being curious. And when you're into the habit of being curious, you will naturally be working on your leadership style, how you try to create, your own view of the world and get information and more. It is that active soliciting that'll happen by being curious. And it also helps with, you don't want to be the smartest person in the room. There's that saying, always listening to things, always going to meetings, trying to learn as much as you can. All of those will ultimately just help and strengthen you and ultimately your own leadership knowledge. So with that, I will stop here. Probably should have done this on PowerPoint, but wanted to keep it somewhat conversational and casual. I will happily do a part 2 with slides if there's interest. But hope you all enjoyed. Again, the main real takeaways are it's not that hard to be more than just an actuary. All you have to do is remove the box that the term can place you in. Try and expand your mind by being very curious about everything: people, functions, behaviors, and to think about what you want to be known for. Make sure you're being very self-aware in actually emulating those behaviors, learning for where the behavior may not be there, and ultimately trying to think of yourself more as a holistic, kind of never-ending living process as opposed to just an actuary. So thank you all very much for your time. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me by LinkedIn or by email. Thanks very much.